Daniel Cooper wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed through another wall of thick vines. The jungle of Kelthara 7 was nothing like the places he had read about in training. Everything here seemed designed to make life difficult. The plants had thorns that caught on his clothes. The ground was either too soft or covered in roots that tried to trip him. And the heat never let up, not even when the twin suns began to set. 3 weeks had passed since his scout ship crashed into this swamp world. 3 weeks of eating strange fruits and drinking water he had to boil twice to make sure it was safe. 3 weeks of loneliness that pressed down on him like a physical weight. The emergency beacon was broken. The communication system was fried. He was stuck here until someone noticed he was missing and came looking. Daniel had learned some things in those 3 weeks. He knew which areas of the swamp were safe to walk through and which ones would pull him down into the mud. He knew that the blue flowers meant fresh water was nearby. He knew that the howling sounds at night came from animals that stayed away from fire. Small victories, but they kept him alive. On this particular afternoon, he was heading back to his shelter when he heard it. A sound that did not belong in the normal chorus of jungle noises. It was a voice, high and scared, calling out words he could not understand. But the tone was clear. Someone needed help. Daniel forgot about being tired. He forgot about being careful. He ran toward the sound, his boots splashing through puddles and his hands shoving branches out of his way. The voice came again. More desperate this time. Closer. Now. He burst through a thick cluster of ferns and stopped short. There, about 30 feet away, was a pool of quicksand, and in the middle of it was a young woman who was definitely not human. She had skin that was blue-gray like storm clouds. Her eyes were huge and golden, catching the light like a cat's eyes at night. And she had 4 arms. 2 were flailing above her head, while the other 2 tried uselessly to push against the quicksand. She was sinking. Already the thick mud was up to her chest. When she saw Daniel, her eyes went even wider. She said something in a language he did not know. It might have been a question, or a plea. Maybe both. "Stop moving!" Daniel shouted at her. He knew she probably could not understand English, but he had to try. "You are making it worse." He dropped his backpack and looked around frantically. There had to be something he could use. A branch? No, they would break. A rope? He did not have one. Then, he spotted it. A thick vine hanging from a nearby tree. It looked strong, and it was long enough to reach her. Daniel grabbed the vine and pulled on it hard. It held. He wrapped one end around his hands and threw the other end toward the woman. It fell short. She was too far away. "Come on," Daniel muttered. He pulled the vine back and threw it again. Harder this time. This time it landed close enough. The woman grabbed it with 2 of her hands and wrapped it around her body. "Hold on tight," Daniel called out. He found a tree with a thick trunk and braced his feet against its roots. Then, he started to pull. The quicksand did not want to let her go. It held onto her like a living thing, fighting him for every inch. Daniel's muscles screamed. His hands burned, where the vine dug into his palms. Sweat poured down his face and into his eyes, but he kept pulling. "Come on, come on, come on," he grunted with each pull. His feet slipped once, and his heart jumped into his throat. But he caught himself and kept going. Slowly, inch by terrible inch, she rose out of the quicksand. First her chest emerged, then her waist, then finally her legs. With one last massive pull, Daniel dragged her onto solid ground. She collapsed, gasping and coughing, covered head to toe in thick brown mud. Daniel let go of the vine and rushed to her side. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" The questions spilled out, even though he knew she could not answer them. She looked up at him with those huge golden eyes. Her chest was heaving as she tried to catch her breath. She was shaking. probably from fear and exhaustion, but she did not look injured. Daniel pulled his water bottle from his belt and offered it to her. She stared at the bottle for a moment, then took it carefully with one muddy hand. She drank slowly, watching him the whole time. When she finished, she pressed one of her hands against her chest and said a single word. Kira. Daniel understood. It was her name. He pointed to himself. Daniel. She repeated it, her accent making it sound musical. Danielle. Then she tried to stand up. Her legs wobbled like a newborn deer, but she was determined. Daniel offered his hand and she took it, letting him help her to her feet. That was when Daniel noticed her jewelry. She wore necklaces made of carved bone and metal. Bracelets wound around all 4 of her wrists. And there was a band around her head that looked almost like a crown. These were not the simple decorations of a regular person. These looked expensive, important. Before he could think more about it, the jungle around them exploded with movement. 6 figures crashed through the undergrowth. All of them the same species as Kira. They were taller than her and built like warriors. They carried spears and blades made of sharpened stone and metal. And they all looked very, very angry. The largest one, a male with scars covering his arms, shouted something in their language. It did not sound friendly. All 6 of them surrounded Daniel, their weapons pointing at him. Daniel raised his hands slowly, making sure they could see he was not holding anything. Easy, he said, in the calmest voice he could manage. I was just helping her. Kira pushed through the circle of warriors. She was still shaking and covered in mud, but she positioned herself between Daniel and the angry warriors. She spoke rapidly, pointing at the quicksand and then at Daniel. Her voice was firm despite her exhaustion. The warriors did not lower their weapons, but they stopped advancing. The scarred one responded to Kira, his tone slightly less aggressive but still suspicious. A heated conversation followed. Daniel could not understand the words, but he understood the situation. They were arguing about what to do with him. Finally, the scarred warrior gave a short nod. 2 of the others moved to support Kira, taking her weight as her legs threatened to give out again. The remaining 4 kept their weapons ready as they began to escort Kira away. She looked back at Daniel one last time. In her eyes, he saw something that might have been gratitude, or maybe an apology. Then the jungle swallowed the group whole, leaving Daniel alone in the fading light. He stood there for several minutes, his heart still pounding. His hands were raw from the vine. His body ached from the effort of pulling her out. But he was alive. And more importantly, so was she. Daniel picked up his backpack and started the long walk back to his shelter. He did not know what would happen next. Would the warriors come back? Would they be grateful or hostile? Had he just made first contact with an alien species? Or had he made a terrible mistake? As the darkness closed in around him, Daniel realized that his lonely existence on this planet had just become a lot more complicated. The next morning, Daniel woke to an unusual silence. The jungle was never truly quiet. There were always birds calling, insects buzzing, or leaves rustling in the wind. But today everything felt muffled, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. He lay in his makeshift bed for a moment, staring at the rocky ceiling of his cave shelter. His hands were sore from yesterday, covered in red marks where the vine had burned his skin. He got up slowly and stretched. His whole body was stiff. Pulling someone out of quicksand, it turned out, used muscles he did not know he had. Daniel walked to the entrance of his cave and stopped dead in his tracks. Someone had been here during the night. 3 baskets sat just outside the cave entrance. They were woven from some kind of plant fiber, the pattern intricate and beautiful. Daniel approached them carefully, looking around to see if anyone was watching. The jungle looked empty, but he had the distinct feeling that eyes were on him. The first basket contained fruits. They were the same purple ones he had seen the aliens eating when he watched them from a distance weeks ago. He had been too nervous to try them before, not knowing if they were safe for humans. The second basket held strips of dried meat. It looked like jerky and smelled salty. The third basket was filled with plants he recognized from his basic xenobiology training. They were medicinal herbs used to treat wounds and infections. Daniel picked up one of the fruits and examined it carefully. Someone had left these here on purpose. But why? And who? He decided to test the fruit. He cut a small piece with his knife and ate it. The taste was tart, almost like a lemon mixed with a strawberry. He waited for 10 minutes, checking his body for any bad reactions. His stomach felt fine. His head did not hurt. His skin did not itch. The fruit seemed safe. "Thank you," Daniel called out to the empty jungle. He felt a bit silly talking to trees. But if someone was listening, he wanted them to know. He was grateful. For the rest of the day, Daniel went about his normal routine. He checked his ship's crash site, hoping against hope that maybe some system had miraculously started working. It had not. He collected fresh water from a nearby stream. He gathered firewood. But the whole time, he felt like he was being watched. That feeling proved correct when the sun started to set. Daniel was preparing his evening fire when he heard footsteps. Not the careful, silent footsteps of someone trying to sneak up on him. These were deliberate, meant to be heard. Someone wanted him to know they were coming. A figure emerged from the tree line. It was a young male alien. Smaller and less muscular than the warriors from yesterday. His skin was a lighter shade of blue-gray, and his face had fewer markings. He carried no weapons that Daniel could see. His 4 hands were raised in what looked like a peaceful gesture. Daniel set down the stick he had been holding and stood up slowly. He kept his hands visible, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. The young alien stopped about 10 feet away. He pointed to himself with one hand and spoke. "Vex." Daniel understood. It was the same thing Kira had done. "Daniel," he replied, pointing to himself. Vex nodded enthusiastically. His golden eyes were bright, with what looked like curiosity, rather than fear. He began making gestures, pointing back toward where the warriors had taken Kira yesterday. Then he made a symbol with his hands that Daniel did not understand at first. Vex repeated it several times, adding more gestures. It took a while, but Daniel started to piece together what Vex was trying to communicate. He was talking about Kira. The elaborate hand symbol seemed to mean something like important or high rank. Vex pressed his hands together near his heart in what might have been gratitude. Then, he made a gesture that looked like he was asking if Daniel understood. "She is important?" Daniel asked, pointing in the direction Vex had indicated. "Someone special in your group?" Vex nodded vigorously, even though Daniel knew the alien could not understand his words. The meaning was clear enough. Kira was not just any member of their people. She was someone significant. Then Vex's expression turned more serious. He made several more gestures that Daniel struggled to interpret. Something about waiting, something about watching, and something that looked like it might mean decision or judgment. Daniel got the feeling that Kira's people were trying to figure out what kind of person he was. Vex reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled out a small object. He stepped forward and held it out to Daniel. It was a token, carved from dark wood, about the size of Daniel's palm. The carving was incredibly detailed, showing patterns and symbols that meant nothing to Daniel but were clearly important. "What is this?" Daniel asked, taking the token carefully. Vex did not answer with words. He just pressed his hand against Daniel's chest, over his heart, and nodded. Then he stepped back, gave a small bow, and disappeared into the jungle before Daniel could say anything else. Daniel examined the token by the light of his fire that evening. The wood was smooth from handling, and the carvings were so fine that they must have taken hours to make. Whatever this token meant, It was significant. He found a piece of cord and threaded it through a small hole at the top of the token. Then he hung it around his neck, tucking it under his shirt next to his identification tags. The next 2 days followed a similar pattern. People from the alien village came to visit, but always alone and always briefly. An older female came and left containers of fresh water. She looked at Daniel with eyes that seemed to measure his worth. One of the warriors from the rescue party appeared and left a hunting knife with a beautifully carved handle. He said nothing, just nodded once and left. A small child, barely able to walk steadily, toddled up and left a handful of flowers before running away giggling. None of them stayed long enough for Daniel to try to communicate properly. But the message was becoming clear. They were watching him, testing him, trying to decide what kind of being he was. Daniel made sure to behave in ways that would reflect well on him. He kept his camp clean. He did not waste the food they brought. He treated each gift with obvious respect. When he spotted one of his watchers in the trees, he waved in a friendly way, instead of acting suspicious or afraid. He had no idea if any of this mattered to them, but it was all he could do. On the 7th morning after he had rescued Kira, Daniel woke to find his entire campsite surrounded by people. He sat up quickly, his heart jumping into his throat. There were dozens of them. No, not dozens. Hundreds. Men, women, children, elderly individuals. They formed a huge circle around his cave, standing perfectly still and perfectly silent. Every single one of them was looking at him with those large, golden eyes. At the center of the crowd stood Kira. She looked completely different from the mud-covered, terrified person he had pulled from the quicksand. Now she wore elaborate robes that shimmered in the morning light. Her skin was decorated with paint that glowed faintly, creating beautiful patterns across her face and arms. She looked regal, powerful, like royalty. Next to her stood a tall male who could only be her father. The family resemblance was unmistakable. He wore a crown made of woven metal and bone. His bearing was that of a leader, someone used to being obeyed. But Daniel noticed he had a slight limp as he shifted his weight. Daniel stood up slowly, unsure what he should do. Run? Fight? Wait? His mouth was dry, and his mind was racing through possibilities. Had they decided he was a threat? Was this some kind of trial? Then something happened that Daniel never expected. As one, every single alien in the crowd dropped to their knees. The only ones still standing were Kira, the chief, and a few elderly individuals who stood behind them. The sight of hundreds of beings kneeling before him made Daniel feel dizzy. This was not what he had expected at all. The chief stepped forward. His forearms were positioned in a specific pattern that Daniel's instincts told him was deeply meaningful. 2 pressed against his chest. 2 extended toward Daniel. Then Kira spoke. And Daniel almost fell over from shock. She was speaking English. Heavily accented and slow. But definitely English. "You save daughter of Chief Nax," she said carefully, as if she had practiced the words many times. "You save me. This makes you family now." Daniel stared at Kira, his mind struggling to process what she had just said. She had learned English. In 7 days, she had learned enough English to speak to him. That should have been impossible. But here she was, standing in front of him speaking words he could understand. "You learned my language?" Daniel finally managed to say. Kira nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "Kelthani learn fast. Very fast. We hear words. We remember. We see patterns. We understand." She tapped the side of her head with one finger. "Our minds are good at languages. I study many before. Your language is new, but not too hard." Chief Nax spoke then, his voice deep and commanding. The words were in the Kelthani language, flowing and musical. Kira listened, then turned back to Daniel to translate. "My father says you did brave thing. You pulled his daughter from death, his only daughter, his heir to leadership. She paused, searching for the right words. You risked your life for a stranger, for someone not even your species. This is very rare. This makes you special. Daniel shook his head. I just helped someone who needed help. Anyone would have done the same thing. Kira translated his words to her father. Chief Nax responded with what sounded like a firm disagreement. When Kira spoke again, her tone was more serious. My father says no. Many people walked near that place in past days. None stopped to help. They did not see, or they did not care. She gestured to the crowd of kneeling Kelthany. For 7 days, my people watched you. They saw you were alone. They saw you were hurt and lost. But they also saw you were kind. You did not try to hurt anyone. You did not steal. You helped when help was needed. An elderly female with silver markings on her weathered face stepped forward. She spoke at length, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. Kira listened, carefully, before translating. This is Elder Maya. She says the Kelthany have ancient law, very old law. If you save a member of the clan, you become part of the clan. If you save the heir, you become honored family. Kira hesitated, discussing something briefly with her father, before continuing. If you save the heir with no thought of reward, asking nothing in return, you become something more. You become Keldara. It means heart brother, a bond that goes beyond blood. Daniel felt the weight of every golden eye on him. This was not just gratitude, this was something much bigger. What does that mean for me? What are you asking? More discussion followed between Kira and her father. Other elders joined in, their voices adding to the conversation. Finally, Kira turned back to Daniel. It means you are Kelthani now. Not by birth, but by honor. The clan will protect you, feed you, teach you our ways, help you fix your skyship, help you contact your people. She took a breath. But it also means you have duties. You must learn our ways. You must follow our laws. You must stand with us when we need help. Chief Nax spoke again, and at his words, the entire crowd rose to their feet. They began to chant something, a rhythmic sound that started low and built higher and higher. The chief pulled out a ceremonial blade from his robes. Before Daniel could react, the chief drew the blade across his own palm. Blue-green blood welled up from the cut. He offers blood oath, Kira explained. Her voice was soft but clear. This is old way. Sacred way. She looked directly at Daniel. You do not have to accept. If you say no, the clan will still help you. We will still honor you for saving me. But you will not be Keldara. You will not be family. A reason to Sid. Sentence quote. A reason to Sid. A reason to Sitter. Daniel looked at the chief's extended hand, blood dripping slowly from the cut. He looked at Kira, whose eyes held both hope and understanding. He looked at the hundreds of faces watching him, waiting for his decision. His training screamed at him to be careful. Mixing blood with an alien species could be dangerous. There could be diseases, infections, or chemical reactions he knew nothing about. His survival instinct told him to keep his independence, to not tie himself to obligations he did not fully understand. But another part of him, a deeper part, thought about what these people were offering. They were offering him family. They were offering him belonging. They were offering him a place in their world. Daniel thought about his own family back on Earth, so far away they might as well be in another universe. His mother had always told him that kindness was never wasted. His father had always said that a person's character showed in what they did when no one was looking. These people had been looking. They had watched him for 7 days and decided he was worthy. Could he really turn that down? Daniel pulled out his plasma cutter and adjusted it to the lowest setting. He pressed it briefly against his palm, creating a small, controlled burn. His hand stung sharply, and red blood appeared on his skin. He took a deep breath and extended his hand to Chief Nax. The chief's face broke into a wide smile, the first real expression Daniel had seen from him. Their hands clasped together, human red blood mixing with Kelthani blue-green. The chanting from the crowd reached a deafening peak before suddenly cutting off into complete silence. Kira placed both of her upper hands over their joined hands. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. "Welcome, Daniel Cooper of Earth," she said in English. "Welcome to Clan Nax. Welcome home." What happened next was like nothing Daniel had ever experienced. The Kelthani surged forward, lifting him off his feet. They carried him on their shoulders, their voices raised in celebration. Musicians appeared from somewhere, playing instruments that created haunting and beautiful sounds. Dancers leaped and spun, their forearms creating mesmerizing patterns in the air. They carried him through the jungle toward their village. The settlement was incredible, built into and around massive trees that must have been hundreds of years old. The structures were elegant, flowing naturally with the shape of the wood. Bridges connected the buildings, and pathways spiraled up the trunks. It was like something from a dream. They set Daniel down in the central area, a large open space surrounded by the biggest trees. Tables appeared, loaded with food and drink. Children ran around laughing and playing. Adults came up to Daniel one by one, touching his shoulder or arm in what he understood was a sign of acceptance. Kira stayed by his side the whole time, translating when needed and explaining what was happening. "This is celebration," she said. "Not just for you, also for Clan. We celebrate that our ways are still good, that honor still matters, that being kind still has value." The celebration went on for hours. Daniel tried foods he had never imagined, some delicious, and some that made his eyes water. He watched performances that told stories through movement and song. He met so many Kelthani that he knew he would never remember all their names. As the twin suns began to set and the celebration started to quiet down, Daniel found himself sitting with Kira near a fire. His head was spinning, not from drink, but from everything that had happened. "Are you scared?" Kira asked quietly. Daniel thought about the question. "A little," he admitted. "I just promised to be part of something I do not fully understand. I agreed to follow laws I have not learned yet. I committed myself to a people I met 7 days ago." Kira nodded slowly. "That is wise fear, healthy fear." She looked at him with those golden eyes that seemed to see right through him. "But I think you made good choice. And I think you will be good, Keldara." "How can you be so sure?" "Because you stopped," Kira said simply. "That day in Swamp, you could have walked away. You could have pretended not to hear. But you stopped. You helped. That tells me everything about who you are." Daniel touched the wooden token hanging around his neck. "What happens now?" "Now you learn," Kira said. "You learn our language, our customs, our ways, and we help you get home to your people. Being Keldara does not mean you prisoner. It means you family. Family helps each other." As Daniel settled into the sleeping quarters they had prepared for him that night, he realized something important. For the first time since his ship crashed, he did not feel alone. He did not feel lost. He had a clan now. He had a purpose. And somehow, in the strangest way possible, he had found a home on this alien world. The first week in the Kelthani village passed quickly. Daniel woke each morning in his new home, a room carved into the trunk of one of the massive trees. The Kelthani had worked hard to make it comfortable for him, adjusting furniture that was designed for 4-armed beings to suit someone with only 2. They brought him blankets made from soft plant fibers and cushions stuffed with something that felt like down feathers. Kira became his constant companion and teacher. Every morning, she arrived at his door with breakfast and a new lesson. Her English improved rapidly, while Daniel struggled with the Kelthani language. The clicking sounds were especially difficult for his human mouth to produce. "You are getting better," Kira said one morning as Daniel attempted to say good morning in her language. It came out all wrong, and she giggled. "Well, maybe not better, but you are trying hard." "Your language is impossible," Daniel complained, but he was smiling. "How do you expect me to make that sound? I do not have the right parts in my throat." "You will learn. Humans are stubborn. I see this about you." She handed him a piece of fruit. "Today I teach you about clan structure. Is important. You understand how we organize." Over the following days, Daniel learned that Kelthani society was complex. Each clan had a chief, and under the chief were council members who advised on different matters. There were hunters, farmers, crafters, teachers, and warriors. Everyone had a role, and everyone's role was respected. "What is my role?" Daniel asked one afternoon as they walked through the village. Kira thought about this. "You are Keldara. You are bridge between our people and yours. When more humans come, you will help us understand them. You will help them understand us." Is important job. Daniel told her about Earth in return. He described cities with millions of people, vehicles that moved without animals pulling them, buildings that reached toward the sky. He explained about the galactic community, the network of different species that traded and communicated across the stars. Kira listened to everything with intense interest. "My father was right," she said. "Galaxy is much bigger than our small world. We have much to learn." On the 8th day, everything changed. Daniel woke to the sound of horns blowing. It was a harsh, urgent sound that made his heart race. He rushed outside to find the village in organized chaos. Warriors were gathering weapons and checking armor. Scouts were running between buildings carrying messages. The peaceful atmosphere had transformed into something tense and dangerous. He found Kira in the central hall with her father and the council elders. They were gathered around a large piece of treated animal hide that had been drawn on to make a crude map. Everyone was talking at once, their voices sharp with anger and worry. "What is happening?" Daniel asked. Kira looked up, her face tight with concern. "Raiders. From Clan Vosh. They attacked our farms on the edge of territory, took food, destroyed supplies, killed 2 of our people." She pointed to marks on the map. "They become bolder. This is 4th attack in 2 seasons." Chief Nax spoke, and Kira translated. "My father says now we see if you truly Keldara. Blood oath means you stand with clan in trouble. You fight with warriors, or..." She trailed off. "Or what? Or the bond breaks. You still friend, still honored." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He was not a soldier. He was a surveyor, trained to map planets and analyze soil samples. He had basic self-defense training, but he had never been in real combat. The thought of actually fighting, of potentially killing someone, made his hands shake. "What exactly do you want me to do?" he asked carefully. Chief Nax spoke through Kira. "We do not ask you to kill. We do not ask you to die. We ask you to stand with us. To show Clan Vosh that we are strong, that we have allies, that we are not easy targets." She paused. "Vosh raiders respect only strength. If they see human fighting alongside Kelthani, they think twice before attacking again." An older warrior named Toth, his body covered in scars from past battles, spoke directly to Daniel in broken English. "You scared. Is normal. First battle always scary. But Keldara do not run away. Keldara stand together." Daniel looked around at the faces watching him. He saw hope mixed with expectation. They were waiting to see if he would honor his oath, or if his words had been empty. Part of him wanted to refuse, to explain that this was not what he had agreed to. But another part remembered Kira's words about duty and standing with the clan in need. "Tell me what you need me to do," Daniel said quietly. The relief on Kira's face was immediate. You come with war party. You watch our backs. Use your tools, your plasma cutter, whatever you have. You do not need to be hero. Just be there with us. The next few hours were a crash course in Kelthani warfare. The warriors moved in groups of 4, using their 4 arms to handle multiple weapons at once. They carried spears, bows, short swords, and shields all at the same time. Their movements were coordinated and practiced, the result of years of training. Daniel was positioned in the middle of the formation with Kira and Vex, the young Kelthani who had first visited him at his cave. Vex handed Daniel a Kelthani blade, in addition to his plasma cutter. For when enemy get close, Vex said in his halting English, you stick sharp end in bad people. Despite his fear, Daniel almost laughed. Got it. Sharp end in bad people. The war party moved through the jungle toward the raided farms. Chief Nax led from the front, his limp barely noticeable as he navigated the difficult terrain. Daniel found himself surprisingly calm as they traveled. The fear was still there, but it had been replaced by a strange clarity. He was doing this because he had given his word, because these people had accepted him, because this was what family did. They reached the farms as the sun was setting. The destruction was evident even from a distance. Fields had been trampled, storage buildings had been burned, and supplies were scattered everywhere. And there, loading stolen goods onto large pack animals, were about 30 Kelthani warriors wearing red and black war paint. Chief Nax's warriors surrounded the raiders silently, moving with practiced efficiency. When they were in position, the chief stepped forward and called out a challenge. The Vosh raiders spun around, weapons immediately in hand. The Vosh leader was massive, even by Kelthani standards. He had to be over 7 feet tall, with arms as thick as tree branches. Scars covered his body, like badges of honor. When he saw Chief Nax, he laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. The 2 leaders began to talk, or rather argue. Their voices grew louder and more heated. Kira whispered translations as they spoke. Vosh leader is named Kresh. He says this is traditional raiding, part of old ways. Says Clan Nax has grown soft, cannot protect our territory properly. Her voice was tight with anger. He says we deserve to lose our farms. Chief Nax responded forcefully, his voice carrying across the clearing. Even without understanding the words, Daniel could hear the authority and anger in them. Kresh laughed again and said something that made all the Nax warriors bristle with rage. Kira's hands clenched into fists as she translated. He says, prove we are not soft. Prove we still have strength. 7. Then Kresh's eyes fell on Daniel. The Vosh leader's expression changed from mockery to surprise, then to contempt. He pointed at Daniel and spoke rapidly, his tone dismissive. Kira's voice shook slightly as she translated. He asks, what is this? A pet alien? A curiosity? He says if Clan Nax is so weak we need outsider help, then we are truly finished as a clan. Chief Nax responded. And Daniel heard his own name mentioned. Kira translated quietly. My father says you are Keldara. Says you are family, bound by blood oath. Says you are worth 10. Vosh, warriors. Kresh spat on the ground and spoke again, his words clearly a challenge. The other Vosh raiders began cheering and beating their weapons against their shields. The sound was deafening. What did he say? Daniel asked, though he already suspected the answer. Kira turned to him, her expression apologetic. He challenges you. Single combat. One-on-one. If you win, Vosh clan leaves and pays for damages. If you lose. She did not finish the sentence. Every eye turned to Daniel. This was the real test. Not just of his combat ability, but of whether he truly belonged here. Daniel stepped forward, his plasma cutter in one hand and the Kelthani blade in the other. Tell him I accept. The clearing went completely silent. Daniel and Kresh began to circle each other slowly, like two predators sizing each other up. The Vosh champion was enormous, towering over Daniel by more than a foot. His 4 arms held different weapons. 2 hands gripped serrated blades that caught the fading sunlight. Another hand held a spiked club that looked like it could crush bone. The 4th hand carried a curved knife with a wicked edge. Daniel looked small and weak in comparison. He had only 2 arms, only 2 weapons, and far less muscle. But as they moved in their slow circle, Daniel's mind was working fast. He had spent over a week watching the Kelthani. He had seen how they moved, how they fought during practice sessions, how their 4 arms worked together. Kresh was used to fighting other Kelthani. He expected certain moves, certain patterns. Daniel did not have 4 arms. He could not fight the way Kresh expected. The Vosh warrior struck first, moving with surprising speed for someone so large. His upper 2 arms swung the blades in wide arcs, meant to force Daniel backward. But Daniel did not block the way a Kelthani would with upper arms. Instead, he simply dropped low, ducking under the blades completely. Kresh's lower arms came around with the club and knife, expecting Daniel to be at chest height. But Daniel was already rolling to the side, coming up inside Kresh's guard where the long weapons could not reach him easily. The plasma cutter flashed once. It was not a killing blow, just a quick strike at one of the leather straps holding Kresh's armor. The strap severed, and part of the armor fell loose. Daniel followed with the Kelthani blade, not aiming to kill but slashing across Kresh's left thigh. It was a shallow cut, but it drew blood. Kresh roared in surprise and stumbled backward. The watching Vosh raiders shouted in disbelief. No one had expected the small human to draw first blood, but Daniel knew he could not keep this up for long. Every movement took energy he did not have much of. Kresh was stronger, had better reach, and even wounded was incredibly dangerous. The Vosh warrior seemed to realize this too. His initial surprise faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look. Kresh pressed his attack more carefully now, not underestimating his opponent. His 4 arms worked together in complex patterns, creating a wall of weapons that forced Daniel to give ground. One of the blades slipped past Daniel's defense, cutting a line across his ribs. Pain flared hot and sharp. Daniel stumbled, and Kresh moved in for the finish. But Daniel had been paying attention during his time with the Kelthani. He had noticed something about how they fought. After a high attack with the upper arms, there was always a brief moment when the lower arms dropped for balance before coming back up. It was maybe half a second, but it was there. As Kresh raised his upper weapons for what should have been a killing blow, Daniel did not try to block or run. Instead, he lunged forward, moving inside the arc of the attack. He drove his blade upward toward the spot where Kresh's upper and lower arms connected. The Kelthani blade was not sharp enough to cut through limb, but it did not need to be. Daniel had studied the basic anatomy during his xenobiology training. He knew where the nerve clusters were. The blade struck exactly where he had aimed, and Kresh's upper left arm went completely numb. The weapon fell from his useless hand. Daniel did not stop. He brought the plasma cutter around in a wide arc, not at Kresh, but at the weapons in his other hands. The superheated tool destroyed them one by one, melting through metal and wood in flashes of light. In seconds, Kresh stood with only one working weapon and one functional arm on that side. Daniel pressed the tip of his blade against Kresh's throat, right where he knew the major blood vessels ran. The clearing erupted in noise. The Nax warriors were cheering and shouting. The Vosh raiders were yelling in shock and anger. But Daniel kept his focus on Kresh, watching for any sign that the fight was not over. "Yield," Daniel said in Kelthani. It was one of the few words he had learned well. Kresh's face showed a storm of emotions. Anger, humiliation, and disbelief all fought for control. But slowly, something else appeared. Respect. He lowered his remaining weapons and spoke the word that ended the combat. Yield. Daniel stepped back, lowering his blade but not putting it away. His side was burning where Kresh had cut him, and his hands were shaking from adrenaline. But he stayed on his feet, stayed alert. Chief Nax stepped forward and spoke formally. Kira's voice carried across the clearing as she translated. My father says the challenge is finished. Honor is satisfied. He asks if Vosh clan will honor the terms of the combat. Kresh looked at Daniel for a long moment. Then, at Chief Nax. When he spoke, his tone was different. No longer mocking, but measured and serious. Kira translated his words. He says he underestimated. Says the human fights with honor, with skill, with bravery. Says perhaps Clan Nax is not weak if they have such warriors standing with them. She paused. He agrees to the terms. We'll return what was stolen. We'll pay for damages. We'll respect Nax territory. The Vosh raiders began gathering their things, preparing to leave. Kresh approached Daniel one more time. He extended one hand, in what Daniel had learned was a gesture of respect between warriors. You fight good, Kresh said in broken English. For human. Daniel clasped the offered hand, trying not to wince at the pain in his side. You are not bad yourself. For Kelthani. Kresh made a sound that might have been a laugh, then turned and walked away, calling his raiders to follow. The journey back to the village was triumphant. The Nax warriors sang songs about the battle, and with each retelling, Daniel's victory seemed to grow larger. By the time they reached the settlement, the story had become almost mythical. The human who defeated the mighty Kresh with only 2 arms and clever thinking. Kira took Daniel to see Sora, the village healer. The elderly Kelthani examined his wound and made clicking sounds of disapproval. You lucky, she said in careful English. Cut not deep. You live. You heal. You keep your pretty human skin. She chuckled as she applied a foul-smelling paste that immediately took away most of the pain. That evening, Chief Nax called the entire clan together in the central square. Daniel stood beside Kira as her father addressed the crowd. The chief spoke for a long time about honor, courage, and what it truly meant to be Keldara. When Chief Nax finished, he turned to Daniel and placed a hand on his shoulder. Through Kira, he said, When I knelt before you 8 days ago, I hoped you would become family. Now I know you are family. Not because you are human, not because you saved my daughter, but because you stood with us, because you bled with us, because you proved that the heart, not blood, makes someone Keldara. The clan erupted in cheers that echoed through the jungle. Daniel felt something shift inside his chest. For the first time since his ship crashed, he did not feel lost or alone. He felt like he belonged. The following weeks brought new routines. The Kelthani helped Daniel repair his ship, bringing materials and tools they had made or traded for. Vex turned out to be naturally gifted with mechanical systems. Together, they managed to restore the basic communication equipment. When Daniel finally made contact with the nearest human outpost, the response was immediate. A rescue ship would arrive within 2 weeks. He could go home. Daniel should have felt relief, but instead he felt conflicted. He stood in his tree dwelling that evening, packing his few possessions, when Kira appeared at his door. You are sad, she observed. Not sad exactly, Daniel said. Just confused. I want to see my family on Earth. I want to make sure your world is protected when more humans come. But I also feel like this is home now. You have all become family too. Kira nodded slowly. My father and I talked about this. We think you should go. See your Earth family. Make sure your people understand Kelthani ways, so there are no mistakes when we join the bigger galaxy. She paused. But you always have home here. Always have clan. Blood Oath does not break because you leave. Blood Oath is forever. I will come back. Daniel promised. I will make sure the right people understand your culture. And I will return. I know, Kira said with certainty. Because you are Keldara, and Keldara always come home. When the rescue ship arrived, the entire clan gathered to say goodbye. Chief Nax gave Daniel an elaborately carved staff, a symbol of his status that any Kelthani would recognize. Vex presented a communication device they had built together. Sora provided medical supplies. Every clan member offered something to remember them by. Kira was the last. She pressed a wooden token into his hand, identical to the one Vex had given him weeks ago. This one is different, she explained. This one was made by the daughter of the chief, by the future leader of Clan Nax. This one says you are not just Keldara. You are family of the ruling line. You are my brother. Daniel hugged her, not caring that it was not a traditional Kelthani gesture. She hugged back with all four arms. As his ship lifted off and Kelthara 7 became smaller below him, Daniel touched the token around his neck. He had come to this world as a lost surveyor. He was leaving as Keldara, as family, as someone who belonged. He had saved the chief's daughter from Quicksand. Days later, her whole clan had stood before him, not as strangers or aliens, but as family. And that was worth more than anything in the galaxy. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5